Welcome back to the Pulse Check podcast. My name is Ryan Sabatini, founder of Pulse Point AI, and your host for conversations that actually get into the real stuff that's happening inside healthcare. I'm thrilled to have Dr. Shannon Cothran joining us today. She's a board certified OBGYN and Menopause Society certified practitioner. Dr. Cothran is generally reimagining how women experience perimenopause and menopause care. After 15 years in private practice, caring for women across every phase of life, Dr. Cothran did something most physicians never attempt. She walked away from corporate medicine to build something entirely on her own terms. She's the founder of Meno-Start, a full-service concierge program offering personalized and holistic menopause care in McLean, Virginia, a program that pairs expert medical consultation and individualized fitness and nutrition support. Dr. Cothran, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Well, so I want to start at the beginning. So you spent 15 years in traditional OBGYN private practice. What originally drew you to the field, and at what point did menopause and perimenopause specifically become your focus? Was there a certain point you realized?
So in medical school, I really fell in love with surgery. I loved doing surgery, being in the operating room, time would just fly by. It was so great to feel like you were actually doing something, beginning of surgery, something's there. At the end of the surgery, it's not, it's like very definitive. And that really suited my personality. And then I did my OBGYN rotation and I did an emergency C-section. Well, I wasn't doing it because I was the medical student, but I was there. And it was the most amazing thing I'd ever seen in my life, and I was like, this is what I have to do. And so really obstetrics drew me to the field. And then I found that I was really suited to women's health in general. Talking to women, I am a woman, I'm able to relate. It's just such an interesting field of medicine because you get to do, unlike other surgical fields, diagnosis and treatment in the same person. So you see the people in the office, you figure out what's going on. Pregnancy is an obvious one, but in gynecology, you have to figure out what the issue is, and then you can treat it either medically or surgically. You do the treatment, and then the patient's still yours for life. It's a great field, where you can do all of that full scope. And so that's what drew me to OBGYN initially. And I loved that part of my practice, taking care of women and babies and, healthy outcomes obviously are the best. But then as I progressed in my career and also got older myself and done having my babies, talking to my friends, talking to my patients, realizing that gynecology, we are the women's health experts, but we've kind of left people in menopause behind, so focused on fertility and childbearing, which is an awesome part of being a woman and a woman's life. But there's a lot of other things too. And so I think as I evolved as a person and grew, I got more interested in menopause care and kind of what happens after,
Absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah,
it seems like it's a long continuum from
right.
birth to going into perimenopause and menopause, and you feel like not only do you have the medical background to address these things, but you're a woman yourself, and you know how it feels. and
Right.
and so
And you
I
don't have to know how it feels to take care of people, but for me, it is helpful.
sure. No,
Yeah.
that's amazing. So I want to kind of pull back the curtain a little bit on what you built at Meno-Start, because it's definitely different than the traditional setup, and it's different than most things that you see in the space. Can you describe Meno-Start to someone that's never heard of it? What do you get, and how's the model different than going to see your regular OBGYN?
So the model is, like you said, a lot different. And the main difference is that we are really focused on taking care of the whole person, not just the uterus, which is what you get at your regular G. And that's where the fitness and nutrition part is so key, and really wellness, focusing on wellness, not just problem-based medical care. And so we have it designed right now as a 6-month program where you can really learn about yourself and what's happening in your own menopause, perimenopause journey, and then solutions that can take you, for the next several decades, into that phase of life, the rest of your life, really. So what you get is access that's different than other traditional practices, my cell phone, email. You get the studio, obviously not everybody is accessing that part, but it is a really important for bone health, menopause symptoms, longevity, just health, investing in your health is part of retirement planning, all of the parts of our life and bodies and who we are for, as we go from midlife beyond. And then we're really also creating a community here. It can be very isolating as you become empty nesters and dealing with aging parents and changes in your career. There's, not a lot of spaces for this phase of life where you can meet other people going through the same thing. And so I wanted to design a place where you're just yourself. You're not Dr. Cothran, you're not Tommy's mom, you're, not whatever else. You can just be like Shannon, you know, and talking to other people that are also in the same phase. That's been really great.
That's amazing. It sounds like your program is very different in the sense that it's less reactive and more proactive. So instead
Yes,
of
I love that.
waiting for a problem to happen and just throwing a fix at it, whether it's a medication or something, you're really inviting women to enter a space at the most vulnerable part of their life and make it seem almost like a friendship.
Yes.
That's amazing.
You're so good at synthesizing that kind of thing, Ryan. Thank you. I need you on when I'm like, Ryan, how do I say this? That's perfect. I love that.
No problem. So I want to zoom out a little bit and
Okay.
put your work into context because the industry itself seems to be going through a pretty big shift and you're right in the middle of it. I want to talk about some trends. Let's start with the FDA. In November 2025, the FDA removed the black box warning on hormone replacement therapy. That's been in place for over 20 years. So as a clinician who sees patients on the daily, what's your reaction to that? And has it changed the conversations that you're having? Does it change the way that you practice?
It didn't change the way that I practice, but it's been great. And I think it was more helpful for patient perceptions. So we were surprised that they took the black box off all estrogen. We thought it was just going to be off vaginal estrogen, which is kind of a different therapeutic and risk medication than systemic estrogen, but they ended up taking it off all estrogen. So we were actually happy about that. What it does, I think, more than change my practice, like what I'm prescribing, is it helps the patient kind of trust what I'm telling them. Because, I would give people vaginal estrogen all the time because it really helps. It's safe, even in now breast cancer survivors, they're allowing it. And people would go home, get the insert from the package and read it and be like, why is Dr. Cothran trying to kill me? This sounds terrible. And so because back in, like you said, my corporate medicine practice, I didn't really have time to explain all the nuances of what that was. And I didn't have a lot of follow-up opportunities with patients. I wouldn't find out till the next year that they never even started it, you know?
Right.
And so that was, I think, a real shame and a loss of opportunity for that person to get the benefit of the medicine that I was giving them. So taking off that black box warning, it got the conversation into the mainstream, which was awesome too. Even at cocktail parties or whatever, talking to people on the sideline of the soccer field, some people would even be embarrassed to talk about vaginal estrogen, but now it's everywhere. People talking about it. It's kind of taken some of that, shyness about talking about it away. And so that's really helped increase access as well. So I think it's been great.
Sure. Yeah, it sounds like, whenever there's some type of regulatory change and that information is disseminated to the public via the news,
Right.
sometimes it creates, patient fear or misinformation. Do you have any trouble or have you had any trouble after that release came out with, clarifying that education gap? Or do your patients, are they pretty receptive to that?
I think because of this model that I'm working in right now, people are kind of seeking HRT and maybe more so than if I was just in general GYN. They're coming to me for that. So my patients has been very receptive to it. Plus, we live in Northern Virginia, which is one of the most highly educated places in the country. Everybody here has a PhD or whatever. And so that's why it's so joyful for me to talk to patients here because it's really more of a partnership on health. And so there hasn't been anywhere where I'm trying to convince someone.
Sure. That's great.
Yeah,
Awesome.
I'm lucky.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. It's a testament to what you've built at Meno-Start. So, from what I've been reading, there's a documented shortage of menopause literate providers in the U.S. right now. What does that mean for your practice, your capacity, and frankly, to meet the needs of everyone that needs you?
Yeah, it's interesting. I trained in the early 2000s and we never talked about perimenopause in my residency training. Maybe an hour of lecture on menopause, but everything I learned about menopause care was related to postmenopausal bleeding and like what to do if that happened. And then everything else was like, yeah, sorry. During that time that WHI study came out, which showed the increase risk of breast cancer, heart attack, and stroke, since been debunked, but nobody wanted to do HRT after that. So, you have a generation of doctors trained in that time period. Menopause care wasn't really even, it was just kind of an afterthought. And so I think that started the issue. And then women also, my mom's generation and before her mom didn't want to talk about it. It's kind of taboo. There's a lot of anti-aging bias. You're just supposed to be young forever. And if you talk about menopause or admitting that you're in menopause, you're automatically telling people you're old. And
Yeah,
so people didn't want to do that. And so those things have both shifted. Our ideas about how to treat menopause, and that it's really more of a full body experience, not just the end of your period. And I think there's also maybe Gen X or whatever societal change of using, aging and midlife as more of a superpower than, something that we're trying to hide or not admit. And so there's more demand now, but the training has to catch up. And so it is. I actually have a lot of residents who want to come and follow me in my clinic because there's not a lot of people doing menopause care. And so the younger physicians are really interested, which is great. And then the Menopause Society, nobody was going to those meetings 10 years ago. And now, they sell out immediately and people, their membership has increased exponentially. So there's definitely, even though there is like you said, a dearth in people taking care of people in menopause, there's a huge interest in education. And so I think that's going to fix itself.
sure. So is there anything that you have to actively do to put your outreach out there and educate or get your information out there and your content so that women maybe feel like they can open up and talk about this and maybe reach out to you?
That's been the biggest challenge, honestly, is figuring out market education. How do I tell people about what we're doing and outbound to them and outreach? Also, convincing women in a direct patient care model, that not using insurance and investing in their health, is okay. I think that there's people, they don't consider themselves as a priority when they're spending money, you know? And so to tell them, like, hey, you deserve this just as much as, your kid deserves that $6,000 camp that they're going to. And it'll help everybody if you're healthier. So honestly, that's been from business and just wanting to help as many people as possible has been the biggest challenge that I've had. And lately I've been thinking, I don't know if menopause is maybe too narrow and to extend it to just saying midlife women's health care because people think of menopause as like that year that their period stops. So maybe even getting away from that word and trying to explain like, no, it can be anywhere from, late 30s to 70, that we're talking about these issues. even beyond 70, but not.
No, for sure. That would be interesting to kind of experiment to see the feedback as far as your patient intake. What would change, if you open up the your outreach a little bit more. So I want to kind of shift gears, go inside your business itself, because for purposes of the podcast, I think the operational side of running a practice like this is something that doesn't get talked about enough. And I think your listeners who are clinicians and in similar spot to you or healthcare entrepreneurs may find it valuable and they can all learn from each other. So running a practice like yours means, you're wearing a lot of hats. You're a physician, a founder, a marketer, and manager. How do you manage all that so that you're still spending a majority of your time in front of your patients?
That's a great question. I think the one thing about physicians that is helpful to wear all those hats is that we have a strong work ethic. We're used to working, you know, a lot of hours, 24 hours, and even a kind of feeling that, the most tired person is the best, physician. And that's kind of like a competition of like how many hours you've worked, as a badge of honor, which maybe isn't good for other reasons like physician burnout and things like that. But it doesn't feel like I wish I could do more even. I'm not feeling that's too much. So I don't know exactly if that's the answer that you're thinking about, but it's manageable, compared to what you're expected to do in a private practice. You can do the other parts, if somebody's thinking about becoming a physician entrepreneur, that your training has not exactly prepared. There's a lot of learning that you have to do and language and how to talk about business in a different way than you do about medicine. But you can, the work can be done. I
Sure.
do have Fridays off as like an admin, from being patient facing. So that's one thing. And when you're, able to be adequately compensated for your patient facing time, seeing less patients is possible. And so then you do have some space to do the other parts too.
That's great. It sounds like, when you really have a value based practice where you really have something valuable to provide, you can really focus on treating those patients. And so where you're not having to see a large volume of patients like the traditional practice.
Best part for both myself and the patients. But I've learned a lot along the ways. I'm not going to tell you that it's just been like a smooth ride. But, I'm managing, like you said, I'm the manager. And sometimes I think there's a quote from The Office where she's managing her own department and she's the only employee. And she's like, and I'm very hard to manage. And sometimes I feel that way. Managing as my own manager, I can be difficult to manage.
It's not the other employees, it's yourself. That's funny. So, walk me through the journey at Meno-Start, from the moment, your patient walks through the door, initial outreach to, being fully active in the program. What does it look like? And is it pretty seamless or is there.
So, because, we are running pretty small on employees, most of the scheduling and the billing platform is done through the website, which has been really great. I think that's also good for the patients. They don't have to give their credit card information to anyone, but, the internet or whatever, not like a person. And so they sign up through the website and then they get a link to my calendar. They're able to sign up and find their own, based on their life, what works for them too. Hour-long appointments. And then they do get a reminder, an email, or come in. We have free parking, which is awesome. That's something in this area that's not always true, but
A big deal.
I think that's important, right? Or they can do virtual, whichever fits in their life best. But I do prefer the in-person. I think most people prefer that too. I can do vital signs, things like that you can't do online, which is important for some of the medications that we're giving. So they
Absolutely.
come in. Instead of a waiting room, I have a living room. We have coffee, tea, water, sparkling water. They fill out some paperwork. It's very calm. I'm able to run on time, which I didn't do in my old practice, so nobody's waiting around forever. And then we do the first visit's very consultative. We kind of sit and talk and figure out. Most people are coming in with something that's really bothering them. So, like, what's the most bothersome thing? And then we make a plan. And if that's labs, imaging, medications, whatever it is. And then I would, follow up with them with text or email the next week. Usually I see them again in, 2 to 4 weeks, depending on what we decided and what they need. And then they're also able to access the fitness and nutrition side if they want to. A lot of my patients do because its metabolism is a big issue in menopause and perimenopause, as well as bone health and joint pain, all things that get better with that part of your life or with exercise in this part of your life. And so they have a 1 hour consult with Coach D, which is our personal trainer. And then he does an assessment, body fat, muscle, weight. He does some physical assessments. And then they schedule with him if they're going to do the one-on-one training either once or twice a week. And so it's nice because they're coming in even if it's not an appointment with me, but I'm here and they're like, hey, can I ask you a quick question about, if I'm not with somebody? So it does feel very communal too. And
That's
then we
awesome.
have some group classes, which I do as well, which is nice. So I get to interact with people that way too. And quarterly, we do some community events. We had a Meno hike this month or last month, May. Yeah, which was great. I had 12 people come and it was just nice. It was physical, but we got outside and, other people were able to meet each other. So that's the way that people can interact with the program. It's
That's
designed as 6 months, but we have had a couple re-sign up for another 6 months. So that's possible. And yeah,
that's great.
yeah.
It sounds very communal and open and, touching on the medical side, but then also offering that functional side is very unique
Yeah.
and adds a lot of value for sure.
It is different and I'm still hoping that it's going to work. I'm not sure, but I think that it's a lot of value, like you said, to add. But I also offer full GYN exam and, other exam too. I could do your pap smear and I have a GYN exam room. So it's, really full medical service as well.
Sure. Yeah, that's great. That's fantastic. So you've built something that clearly works. The system's working for you right now. So I kind of want to talk about where you go from here. You have a lot of passion and ambition for this type of work, but owning a business kind of exposes some of the harder questions. There's a lot of noise, it seems like, at least from what I'm seeing in the industry, in the menopause space and in women's health space. Simply through like Instagram. There's a lot of telehealth platforms, supplement brands,
Right.
applications, wellness influencers. What's the hardest part about staying, visible and cutting through all that so that you can really get what you have to offer to the right group of women?
Yeah. I think the hardest part, that's a great question, is really I had to get out of my comfort zone in I'm very comfortable one-on-one with people, but like making a video for Instagram or even kind of doing this, I mean, it's one-on-one, but it's not natural for me. And I had to kind of get over that. So, because in this era of health influencers, I think your patients almost, that's how they find you. And so you can be the best doctor in the world, but if nobody knows about you, it's not going to help anybody. So kind of figuring out what my voice is going to be in that way has been challenging. So that's a work in progress, but I think medical marketing is still more word of mouth than, social media, but you do have to have, if your neighbor is like, "Hey, you should see Dr. Cothran, like she really helped me or whatever." They're going to go look me up and I have to have something out there. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So I think the biggest challenge is just you got to get out of your comfort zone and, make a dumb video if you think it's dumb, but it might actually be a message that someone's looking to hear.
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think it's great that you've opened yourself up to those changes and how information is kind of spread out to your
Yeah.
audience, and I think that that'll definitely benefit a lot.
But the amount of influencers and the supplements and the wellness, people and everything that's out there, I think a lot of doctors look at that as a negative, like a threat almost to what they're doing. we're the experts. Like, how come people aren't listening to us? But it's helpful if you reframe that to, it's getting awareness. People come in, we're all speaking the same language. It gives them kind of the questions to ask that they were hoping to ask. So, and, I don't know everything. Maybe there is a supplement that's going to help somebody with their hot flashes more than the medicine I learned, back in 2002. You know what I mean? And so I feel like doctors that I know and myself in the past, opening up to different ideas and being okay with people asking questions about that and then saying, I'll look it up and then partnering with them. Again, I keep using that word to say, this supplement makes sense, but this one doesn't. And here's why I think that is very helpful to patients rather than just, oh, they're all quacks. Don't listen to the internet. Kind of,
So not fully dismissing them,
right.
taking their considerations and
Yeah.
while also integrating some of the, you know, solutions that work as a physician.
Exactly. And it reaches more of a population too, because people are turned off by just going to a physician and getting a bag of pills and then see you in a year, So, kind of getting the people that want to do it more holistically, less pharmaceuticals, all of those things, we have offerings for that too. So that helps access a whole range of people that, deserve care as well, evidence-based care. So,
Is there a part of your business or that maybe you wanna take further, like, like, to reach women nationally, or do you go virtually more, or is it hard to go virtual?
yeah, the virtual question's interesting and obviously something you guys think about with your business. And I think that space is pretty saturated for menopause, honestly. I wouldn't try to compete with those companies that are already really efficient at that. And I think there's more of a benefit to having an office, an exam room, in person patient care rather than virtual. So, and then there's medical licensing and other things, for personal. I can't practice in California. I only have a Virginia license. And I think those big companies, they just have so many people that it's easier for them to be national. So, my scaling plan is more to open other Meno-Starts with other physicians in different cities, different markets. That's my 5-year dream.
That's
To
awesome.
have the
That would be
Meno-Start Philadelphia, Meno-Start Boston. you
I
know?
did notice that I know a couple of, functional medicine doctors that have done the same thing on the East Coast. They were on, the Huberman podcast from Dr. Huberman from Stanford, and they have a similar model to that, so I'd be
Great.
inter yeah, it'd be
Yeah.
interesting to see.
But
Uh,
having virtual option, you have to now. I have because sometimes somebody's kid is sick and they can't make it here. Great, let's hop on a call. Or you're driving and that's a place where you have privacy in your car, in an hour. Let's talk then. If it's a subject that's sensitive that you don't want, people around to hear what you're saying. So the direct patient care model, since we don't have to bill for each visit, really allows for that flexibility and personalization of what people need and how they access us.
yeah, that's great, not having to meet with your patient and figure out how to code the visit and
Yeah,
so
it's
that
so
they're,
great.
reimbursed properly.
Yeah.
That's great. Well, Dr. Cothran, this has been super insightful. I've had a lot of fun talking with you, and honestly, I could continue talking for another hour, but we're coming up on time. So, thank you for your honesty and your expertise, and for what you're building. I want to make sure that our audience knows how to find you. What's the best place to find you, or where's the best place?
The best place is our website. It's menostart.com, MENO-START.com. And we have a free 15-minute consult for people that want to find out more information. We're on Facebook and Instagram, Meno-Start, and I'm on LinkedIn as Shannon Cothran, MD, if people want to reach out through those.
Great. Well, thank you for listening. We'll see you next time on the Pulse Check. Thank you, everyone.